everybody, this is Ads. Today's video is brought to you by Avalo, which offers free 24/7 mental and emotional health support. You can download at www.avalo.app. Today I'm going to talk about suffering and our relationship to suffering. Many people have this conception that we shouldn't suffer in our life, or we want to minimize suffering. And that's evolutionarily baked into us as human beings want to limit our suffering because that might prolong our life. It might increase our likelihood of succeeding in other areas. And since human beings don't live in nearly as much real danger and fear, I think many of our common life problems like school, relationships, job, career, performance, whatever it might be, we have started to hijack some of those fear pathways and those fear responses that have been reserved for things like running away from a lion. And now we have similar emotional responses to the existential fear or the stress from school, or we make these lions and tigers out of our personal situation. And we oftentimes try and then limit our exposure to suffering, when in reality, suffering is typically the door in which one must go through to succeed or to progress or to grow. And the most concrete example I can come up with was when I was in my early 20s and I was struggling with thoughts of suicide and depression. I thought I shouldn't be having those thoughts. And so I ran away from them and they got worse. And in reality, what I had to do is I had to look at those thoughts and I had to ask them and say, why am I having these thoughts? So that I could learn from the suffering. I had to go through the suffering instead of away. And one thing that helped me do that effectively was professional mental health support. So I totally advocate for people to engage in certain types of mental health support services. Therapy was helpful for me along this journey because I didn't have the skills or the tools to address this challenge with my own pain and suffering by myself. So I got somebody who's a professional. And it would be years later that I would realize that typically our suffering is the very key to personal growth. So instead of going the direction that I was previously headed in my life, that suffering was a sign that that life wasn't for me. And so I course corrected and went a different direction. And I think in our modern society of trying to minimize suffering and minimize discomfort and to maximize disengagement, really, no responsibilities, no accountability, true, I guess leisure isn't exactly the right word, but like that's what people are often striving for, is like the absence of participation, whether it's because we've got too much stuff going on or the phones or whatever, doesn't really matter to me, the cause of it. But there's a lot of people that seek that sort of mental reprieve because of how overactive and constantly engaged we are. So suffering sometimes we can try and minimize by disengaging from conflict. And suffering, I think, is usually the tool, the reason that we're suffering. For example, if you're walking and you step on a thorn and you continue to walk and you keep stepping on the thorn and wondering, why is my foot hurt? Why is my foot hurting? Like, one would have to stop what they're doing, look at the foot, take the shoe off, try and pull out the thorn, and that's probably going to be the most painful part. But in doing that, one can continue in life. And I think emotional and mental health complications or challenges are oftentimes similar thorns in our shoes, or thorns in our feet. Um, and usually the thorns that we've acquired have been acquired for a specific reason. And what I mean by that is, like, there may have been a something going on in the house. You had to step on this thorn in order to get off of the trail that you were previously on. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're in an abusive home. You probably developed certain types of defense mechanisms, emotional defense mechanisms, that made it possible to exist in that home. And at a certain time in life, these emotional defense mechanisms start to negatively impact us. They start to actually inhibit our personal growth and our personal development. And I went to this seminar that talked about patterns. Um, and these negative emotional patterns can sometimes turn on us. And so while we may have used them at a certain point in our life to mitigate suffering, oftentimes they will no longer serve us, and it's our job as an individual to try and change our relationship to these behavioral patterns, to change our relationship to the source of that suffering, such that we can move through that suffering and out onto the other side of whatever that emotional pain might be.